Okay, I should probably unlock the microphone control. So just give it half a minute because today there's a big delay, so I have to see if the audio is working or not. I'm just messing around with some cables. Okay, technically that should work, but let's make it a little bit higher. Okay, the audio is working. Just give a few minutes for people to join if people want to join up. I'm going to try to fix this thing here in the meantime. Hate those blasted things. Okay, maybe that will do it. Oh yeah, okay. One more thing I need to do. By the way, feel free to join the chat. It's always good if people come and talk in the chat. So I know that it's a very bad time in the US because the time difference with Japan is huge. All right, what's going on here? Okay, I'm almost there, getting there anyway. All right, let's put that up there. Okay, a little bit in. I see. That's going to be a problem. All right, just give me a moment because I am working on new things here, so Facebook really sucks. I don't know. Okay, that's some psychedelic stuff right here. Okay, so I really have to. There's really not much space for the cable here, huh? Okay, and it's still upside down? It doesn't make any sense. What is it doing? Oh, this thing is so frustrating. Huh. Okay. If I can't figure this out in the next few minutes, I'll just give up on this idea because I don't understand why it's doing this way. Okay, I know, and yet let's. yes, I understand this point. Okay, let's reboot this. You're right. Okay, I think this might actually work. Yeah, something like that. Here, I guess. Okay, there we go. Oh, it's so frustrating to deal with Facebook stuff. Seriously, unbelievable. I mean, you'd think it's simple, but it's anything but. I'm gonna mute the speaker here. I don't need to hear myself. Okay, just give a few minutes for people to join. Drop by the chat if you want. I'll make sure to keep an eye on it during the show. And well, today I'm gonna talk about it's gonna be a two-part episode on climate change. So I am doing this on YouTube and Facebook at the same time. Facebook is just to see really if more people come into the chat. I am recording this mostly, and so I'll be looking at the camera most of the time. That's the important thing. Anyway, today, first episode of a two-part episode show on climate change and especially overpopulation. I should probably enable that thing. There we go. I'm still quite new to this stuff, so I don't know, like, if you drop comments exactly if I'll see it or not. Anyway, I am keeping an eye on both YouTube and Facebook. I'll just start in a minute. That's why I like doing the live stream stuff, because eventually I cut it out, and it's actually great when you start editing later and immediately the first 20 minutes are gone. It just seems like you've already done something in the first few minutes. Okay, today's date is January 25th, and it's episode 38. Alright, got it. Just gonna stop a couple of things here that consume memory. That should do it. CPU usage at 3%. I like to see that. Last time it was at 80. I couldn't believe it. It was so laggy and just unbelievable. I am using two mics today, and they are set at different volumes, and it's again just a security measure. Okay, all right, well, let's start, because otherwise I'll be here till the morning. All right, that's more or stabilize the frame here. If you have any difficulty in hearing something, please let me know in the comments or something. Should be fine. I did check everything, but sometimes I check something and it goes wrong, and then it takes me an hour to fix it. So that did happen before. Okay. I will go from here. I just need to this a little. That's maximum. Okay. All right, no problem. A little bit more light. There we go. That should do it. All right, so 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, and welcome to Age of Reason. This is episode 38. Today is January 25th, 2019. And this will be a two-part episode where I talk about climate change and especially overpopulation. It's a good, interesting issue because a lot of people don't even talk about it, or they think about it and then they kind of ignore it. So anyway, it's always good to see actual articles on the topic. Before I start the show, please, I just want to remind you to check out my merchandise on Redbubble, and as well as my book Beyond the Obscure, that is available on Amazon in both print and ebook. And for the people watching on Facebook Live, I know it's not super exciting because you will not see the slides I'm talking about. But anyway, you have to watch the edited version anyway. That's just how it goes. All right. So today's article title, again, it's just one part. So first part, overpopulation looming, planetary disaster outranks all other issues. Yeah, to me that's interesting because climate change is a huge, huge issue, and there's a bunch of issues related to it. They're all affected by one another. It's like a chain, you know. Once you start fiddling around with one part of the chain, then another part somewhere else is affected, and perhaps you don't even know about it, or perhaps you don't want to affect that part, and yet it is. And I think this is an issue that should get attention, much more attention on, you know, the media, for example, and yet we don't really see that. In fact, like I said a couple of shows ago, you know, CNN, for example, is very, very happy to cut away from a climate change section if it favors some of their agenda. That's how it works. Readers of my work may recall a previous op-ed in June in which I repeated my concern about overpopulation as the root cause of disasters now pending as closer to apocalypse for our planet than ever before. And this is actually related to the other article that I will cover next week. CFPUP has so effectively chronicled the adverse effects of powerful monotheistic religions' influence have had on what should be secular matters, perhaps most critically on issues of reproductive choice, which has curtailed adequate progress in curbing population growth. Going from about 2 billion people on the planet in 1931, we now have nearly 8 billion humans on our plundered planet, many living under conditions of great distress. When I was a student back in high school, that was like, you know, over 20 years ago, I already, even without actually really having studied this topic in particular, I was already saying things like, wow, we are overpopulated, and there's way too many people. And at the time, my parents were actually a very bit skeptical about that. They were saying, it's all right, it's, you know, it will sort itself out. But I noticed that the tone now, again, 2 decades later, has shifted a bit, and now they're listening to me a little bit more, and they should. We'll talk about this population growth in a second, but I was thinking about that the other day because I was preparing the show, obviously. And if you think about the past century, of course, there were world wars. Yeah, that's two huge events in the world. And another huge event was the Green Revolution, an agricultural revolution that allowed basically new farming techniques, and more people could be fed. The problem is, like, do we want that actually? Can we sustain it? And apparently we can't. Or we don't want to. Either way, it's not a positive image. Doubtless we are all watching the fires in California and the flooding from historic rainfalls here and around the planet as urgent harbingers of dangerous climate change, despite claims of fake news emanating from our president and the doxies who follow his increased rantings. Well, that I can't debate with that. Trump is definitely a Twitter machine. There's somebody who keeps account of all the lies that he says, and it's like well into the hundreds. I mean, it's maybe into the over 1,000 already since the day that he became president. So yeah, there's that. And the other thing is, people in his cabinet, a lot of them, that actually affects Democrats as well. Okay, it's not just one side of the aisle, but a lot of these people, they're actually bought by fossil fuel industries. So the fossil fuel lobbyists give money to, these senators and governors or whatever, and then these people vote for the fossil fuel industry. So yeah, they are voting against the people, absolutely. And then to make matters even worse, then people continue to vote against their best interests as well. So it's like it's a double cycle. However, just as the commentators on the left, the mention of the primary driver of our growing global pain, population growth, gets virtually no mention. After all, there is so much other vital news to consume, such as the Paul Manafort trial and whether or not Mr. Trump colluded with the Russians. Now, I would say that this person wrote this particular part sarcastically. I would. But I know that because I cut it out here, I know that the next part actually continues, and it's real. I mean, that person is actually convinced that there is something in there, and there might be. I'm not saying that there isn't, but at this point, it's kind of a conspiracy theory, don't you think? And the media spends so much time and attention on this, when really we're listening to the same people that drove us into the Iraq war based on lies, absolute lies, just fabricated facts, as they call it. Definitely an alternative reality right there. And now we're supposed to just believe them because they say something. That's weird. I mean, obviously, I understand that organizations need to rebuild their reputation at one point or another, but I just really don't see this. And again, you have to look for the evidence. All I hear is, bombshell here, bombshell here. It's the beginning of the end, the beginning of the end. The walls are closing in. And this has been going on for 2 years, okay? They've been saying it's the beginning of the end 2 years ago, and then suddenly they start to say it again a couple of months ago. If it was the beginning of the end, shouldn't it end already? That already, CNN is absolutely, for example, obsessed about this story, and they don't even mention things like climate change. So it's very unfortunate. We're definitely focusing on the wrong things, and then these media outlets, they wonder why people get their news from YouTube. So this is a relevant graph here because it shows the population growth going back to 1850 up to very recently, and it's a curve of population right next to CO2 emission, and you'll notice that they go hand in hand. There is no magic here. It's absolutely common sense. Every human being consumes things, so we're all responsible for the emissions one way or another. I, for example, often shop online, and I will buy something from China, but I don't pay an extra tax for that. I should, and I gladly would if there was such a thing, but there isn't. So I pay money for, some dirty industry in China to produce my goods. Then they most likely use a very inefficient way of transportation to bring that thing to a shipping center, and then that gets sold on an airplane, and that's a whole other topic right there. Airplanes are another huge driver of emissions, I should say. And I don't pay extra for that. There is no extra tax for that. And yet, just by purchasing something from China, I've done a lot of harm. And, this is just one example. There are certain examples where I don't contribute to it. I, for example, don't go out because I'm very sick right now. It's very difficult for me to go outside. So that means that I don't even use public transportation. I go shopping once a week, and that's it. I use the heater, though. I use electricity. I use my computers and my cell phone and whatnot. All of that is part of the problem. Now, I admit that, and for a lot of people, they don't even care. They don't even think twice about it. We take it for granted that when we switch on the light, it will come on. If we turn the tap on the faucet, there will be water, clean water, most likely. Although, in the US, of course, there is lead poisoning as well. So, but anyway, we kind of take these things for granted. And the other thing is, like, people don't want to take responsibility. This is a very weird shift recently, and I noticed that everywhere, even in sports. You can't criticize your players anymore these days, or they will stop performing for you, and then, the manager gets the sack. That's a very strange thing. And also in schools, for example, now you can't blame the students. Oh, the students are holy. You can't touch them. So now what do? You blame the teacher, and then the teacher gets fired. Maybe the teacher is a good teacher, but maybe you just don't like him. So then he's or she is out. And I don't think that's the way to deal with life. I just don't see that at all. We need to take responsibility. This is just a related article here. It says the world is losing the war against climate change, and there's a picture here of people fighting fire. This picture comes from a movie called Before the Flood, hosted by Leo DiCaprio. I mentioned it in my top 10 list of movies that I watched last year. This is a picture from Indonesia, so you can see that they're basically destroying the forests, and they're clearing the land for, well, what they grow in Indonesia is palm oil, so palm trees. And, well, palm trees are a huge problem in themselves, of course, but you have to also look at the industry that it goes to. What is palm oil used for? It's used for stuff like makeup, potato chips. And I'm just thinking, well, you can definitely live without potato chips, okay? For sure. There is no argument there. Like, you don't need to put that crap in your body. With makeup, well, look, it's a bit more difficult, but again, you can avoid using palm oil. That's the thing. Here's another picture. This is kind of zoomed out picture. So now we see how deforestation is progressing. Just more and more areas are cleared out to make space for, again, palm trees, probably in this case. And all of that is for short-term profit. So, these people like Bolsonaro in Brazil, they don't care about the big picture 10, 20, 30 years ago. These people only care about tomorrow. And unfortunately, most people in the world only think about tomorrow. It's just as if you look away from your face and the only thing you can see is the tip of your nose, but you can't see anything beyond that. And that's very unfortunate. This is another picture. This is even more zoomed out, so we can see just how clearing the land progresses. And clearing the land, and in this case it's forest areas, well, first of all, it's bad because it's reducing oxygen. And secondly, of course, there's a lot of CO2 that's trapped under the trees. So once you burn that area, you don't just release the CO2 from the fire, you also release all the CO2 that was trapped in the soil. So it's, again, a double effect. The world has warmed more than 1 degree Celsius since the Industrial Revolution. The Paris Climate Agreement, the non-binding, unenforceable, and already unheeded treaty signed on Earth Day in 2016, hoped to restrict warming to 2 degrees. The odds of succeeding, according to a recent study based on current emission trends, are 1 in 20. If by some miracle we are able to limit warming to 2 degrees, we will only have to negotiate, the key word here, only. We will only have to negotiate the extinction of the world's tropical reefs, which, by the way, I think the latest statistic is 99% of the coral population is bleached already, so we're very close to it already. Just takes a little of nudge, and we're done completely there. Sea level rise of several meters and the abandonment of the Persian Gulf. The climate scientist James Hansen has called 2-degree warming a prescription for long-term disaster. Long-term disaster is now the best-case scenario. 3-degree warming is a prescription for short-term disaster, forests in the Arctic, and the loss of most coastal cities. So, yeah, people living in New York, you'd better get your shit together, because once you're underwater, then it's too late. You can't build walls everywhere. I know wall is a popular thing right now, but that is not going to save you. And unfortunately even here, they already say that the 2-degree warming is a best-case scenario. So we already failed, technically. Technically speaking, we already effed up there. Watson, a former director of the... Robert Watson, a former director of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has argued that 3-degree warming is the realistic minimum. 4 degrees Europe in permanent drought, vast areas of China, India, and Bangladesh claimed by the desert. Bangladesh is, by the way, just above seawater or something, so I heard that even a 1 meter rise for them, most of the country will be flooded. Again, unusable for people. Polynesia swallowed by the sea, the Colorado River thinned to a trickle, the American Southwest largely uninhabitable. The prospect of a 5-degree warming has prompted some of the world's leading scientists to warn of the end of human civilization. And given all the crap that people put the planet through and all the wildlife through, honestly, I don't feel any emotion if the human race goes away. I mean, seriously. Nearly everything we understand about global warming was understood in 1979. By that year, data collected since 1957 confirmed what had been known since before the turn of the 20th century. Human beings have altered Earth's atmosphere through the indiscriminate burning of fossil fuels. So we've known that for a while. This is, again, people make it as if it's some kind of new issue. Politicians started talking about this as if it's a new issue, but the data has been available for quite a few decades now. But the coordinated effort to bewilder the public did not begin in earnest until the end of 1989. During the preceding decade, some of the largest oil companies, including Exxon and Shell, made good faith efforts to understand the scope of the crisis and grapple with possible solutions. So, the fossil fuel industry, of course, is notorious for misleading the people, misinforming the people, and they're actually using the same tactics as the tobacco industry used back then. They have fake experts, they cherry pick the data, and they mislead the information. I mean, they confuse the information on purpose. They contradict information without really any evidence. But again, people don't do any extra research, so they don't know about this. They kind of take it on faith. It was understood that action would have to come immediately. At the start of the 1980s, scientists with the federal government predicted that conclusive evidence of warming would appear on the global temperature record by the end of the decade, at which point it would be too late to avoid disaster. More than 30% of the human population lacked access to electricity. Billions of people would not need to attain the American way of life in order to drastically increase global carbon emissions. A light bulb in every village would do it. So I was curious and I looked it up. Now, I have a lot of time to do research because I don't have a full-time job. That's the difference between me and a lot of other people. I spend a lot of time doing research because I have the time to do that, to really just absolutely without any other worry, just sit down and calmly read information and study things. I take courses on Coursera often, or edX. I educate myself because I have the time. A lot of people don't have the time, and that's the reality. But I did check it, and so how bad is the world's situation right now? Well, according to this page, 50% of people are in a big trouble. More than 3 billion people live on less than $2.50 a day. More than 1.3 billion live in extreme poverty, less than 1.25 cents a day, and 1 billion children worldwide are living in poverty. So, again, difficult debate, because for me the easiest solution is just to depopulate the world one way or another. I mean, obviously, I mean through population control. We need to implement some. The religious way is to multiply. I mean, be fruitful and multiply, which is one of the most poisonous idea in the Bible, if you think about it. And the other thing, of course, well, I worked in some places in the US, and there was a lot of food that's thrown out in the garbage bin every time. So obviously it's good food, you know, people could eat that food, but to get that food from point A to point B, you'd need to have some kind of way to transport it, and somebody has to pay for that, and nobody wants to pay for that. So that way we end up with a lot of waste. It goes straight to the garbage. So we do have some extra reserves, but it's not allocated properly due to logistical issues. So then the solution is perhaps to really educate the people in poorer countries, because poorer people have more children, and that's perhaps a point that we should address. If the world had adopted the proposal widely endorsed at the end of the 1980s, a freezing of carbon emissions with a reduction of 20% by 2005, warming could have been held to less than 1.5 degrees. We're already way past that. The inaugural chapter of the climate change saga is over. In the chapter, call it Apprehension, we identified the threat and its consequences. We spoke with increasing urgency, a self-delusion, of the prospect of triumphing against long odds. But we did not seriously consider the prospect of failure. We understood what failure would mean. That's my disease. I'm going to just reread that sentence. We understood what failure would mean for global temperatures, coastlines, agricultural yield, immigration patterns, the world economy, etc. but we have not allowed ourselves to comprehend what failure might mean for us. So this is classic human psychology. First, we have to deny the problem, pretend it doesn't exist, doesn't affect us, and then we come to accept it, but we're not at that stage yet. We don't. When I say we, I'm not even talking about myself, because I studied this stuff, I understand it, I get it. When I say we, it's most people who don't really read into that at all. These people don't understand even the things related to climate change, so they can't move even to the acceptance stage. But hopefully it changes over time. And the article is concluded by that we came so close as a civilization to breaking our suicide pact with fossil fuels can be credited to the efforts of a handful of people, among them a hyperkinetic lobbyist and a guileless atmospheric physicist who, at great personal cost, tried to warn humanity of what was coming. They risked their careers in a painful, escalating campaign to solve the problem, first in scientific reports, later through conventional avenues of political persuasion, and finally with a strategy of public shaming. Their efforts were shrewd, passionate, robust, and they failed. What follows is their story and ours. So this goes back to what I was saying a little while ago. People don't want to take any blame these days at all. We live in this very strange kind of environment where people can never be blamed anymore. Everybody's just gone like super soft and oversensitive over everything. So you can't be blamed, or these people start to cry and make drama, and you don't want that, so you just don't tell them off. But do people really learn anything if you're not tough on them? I wonder. That's a real question, because throughout human history there's always been tough leaders, and things have been getting done. And now we live in a new era where everybody's soft. We don't blame the people. We blame other things. We blame numbers. We blame scientific numbers, or something that is not directly connected to a human being. And I just wonder how that's going to go. So I don't know. We'll see, I guess. That's what I wanted to say here, because the next probably is in the other article, and that's for next week. So okay, I'm just gonna quickly check the comments here. Really doubt there's anything anyway. It's not like people are listening or caring about what I say. Yeah, I have to go back to the first screen, which is here. I think it's a good length today. I did it pretty quickly, I guess. Just do a quick countdown. So yeah, 3, 2, 1. Okay, gotta wait for the motorcycle. Oh, I hate those fucking things. All right, and that's it for today's show. Thanks for joining me, and join me next week for part 2 of this episode. Just want to remind you again, if you enjoy what I do, please support the show by getting merchandise from Redbubble. There's a bunch of different posters there for all sorts of tastes. Please also get my book, Beyond the Obscure. It's available on Amazon in print and ebook. All the links are available in the description. Thank you, and see you next time. Okay, I'm just going to leave it running for a bit. Maybe if people drop by, although I really doubt it. By the way, if you're still watching this, I mean, if anybody is still watching this by this point, if you're interested in the topic, I can recommend a few courses. So there is Denial 101X. That's available on the edX platform. It's a great course. It's hosted by John Cook, who I interviewed a while ago now. And it goes through a lot of things into climate change, a lot of myths that are debunked. He has a great website as well, skepticalscience.com, I think. Really great website. I always like to read about the climate science myths and how they're debunked. He has a bunch of hosts on the show, I mean on the course as well, and they have written their books. Some of them are very interesting, so you know, it's free. It's free courses. That's the thing. There is really no excuse not to study these things these days, unless, of course, like I said, you don't have time. Because again, we live in a system where, you know, people work 9 to 5. That's if you're lucky. Some people work much longer hours than that every day. You obviously need sleep time, which is at least 8 hours a day, and then you don't have any time whatsoever to study or to research stuff. But in my case, I'm fortunate. I do have the time. I did take that course in particular. I took other courses as well. I do have some certificates from them. The only difference is that you have to take quizzes and sometimes write some very short papers that are peer-reviewed by other students, and that's always a fun exercise because the other students on the course, they don't want to mark you down. I mean, that's not the idea. So they will give you good feedback, and it's always interesting to read what they say. Some people don't really understand it, but you know, you can't convince everybody. There's that, yeah, like I said, there's other courses. You have to just look around on Coursera. There's a bunch of free courses there as well. Very interesting ones that talk about the entire planet and that things are going on. It seems to me that a lot of people only care about what happens in their backyard. As long as their backyard is fine and the grass is growing, then it's fine. But there's a big world out there. There are things happening. There are people affected by climate change right now. There are people dying from climate change already. And there are wars happening because of shortage of food, shortage of water caused by climate change. So these things are already happening. And you might be okay, you know, living again with your backyard just fine and the grass green, everything looks fine and dandy, but the world is changing, and while we may have borders on land, the air the air has no border, the water has no border, so all the pollution, all the dirt floats around all over the planet, all the air, all the pollution from China and the US and India, that goes up into the atmosphere, and that gets shoved around the planet as well. So there is no escaping climate change. There's no wall you can build to save yourself from that. So anyway, I'm just talking about these resources are available online. They're free. They're university grade resources. Pardon me. That's one small side effect of my sickness. Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of books. I can definitely recommend some. You know, I bookmark everything. So I bookmark a bunch of stuff that may be relevant at some point. I'm going to end the Facebook Live at this point. Feel free to keep watching on YouTube Live for a few more minutes, and then I will end as well. Yep. It should be. Okay. Oh, that's okay. I'm in the process actually of changing my computer. I'm kind of looking forward to it because I obviously need more strong stuff, but not looking forward to it because I know it's very time consuming. And I mean, I have to deal with two computers actually at the same time, so hopefully it doesn't affect the show. I don't like to. I really need time to focus on this. This is not simple. It may look simple, but it's not. Okay, I'm just going to end it in a couple of minutes, so maybe one or 2 minutes. If you have any last minute questions in the chat, please go ahead, because as far as the show is concerned, we're done for today. It's a dust catcher, that thing. All right. Okay, well, that's it for today then. Again, thanks for watching. I really just hope people learn something from this. Like I said, nobody watches this or listens to this. But I do hope that if people are watching, I do hope that people learn something. And I'm not in a physical condition to do much right now. I was talking about that the other day with my mom. Actually, there are bad things happening in Japan. They massacre dolphins here. They massacre whales. Often, this is not even related to that science whaling. This is just related to stupid rituals that people have here, and they keep doing that in the name of tradition, which is so stupid. I wanted to say a different word, but and I could of course get involved in some groups, but just again, my health does not allow me to go out and do much stuff like that. Moreover, the interesting thing about Japan is that these type of protests usually very, very tiny. We're talking a very small group of people. People here are very apathetic about issues. Again, they pretend that nothing's going on, that everything is fine, but just living in an illusion all your life. I don't know how people can do that. The protests here that get big are the fake protests, which we see often held against the current ruling party, and these are a bunch of old people usually that are paid by the Communist Party, because the Communist Party is the biggest danger, political danger here in Japan to the stability, and they pump a lot of money. That money, a lot of it comes from Korea and China. But these are fake protests. These people are not there to protest. They just get paid, and hey, it's a day out. So for old people, I guess it's good just to get out of the house anyway and get paid for that. Great. Win-win. In the States, I don't know. I don't really see much protesting there, it seems to me that the only place where people still protest is France. Whatever you think of that, at least people still do it. I don't know. I just, man, I don't understand humanity recently at all. I just really don't understand people. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the weird alien here. But I just really don't understand what's going on anymore. I noticed that for quite a while, actually, maybe for a good decade now. Even in my work before, I was always kind of just, you know, showing up in this burning star of energy, you know. And yet the other people were just kind of very casually walking around, and I didn't really feel like the passion from them. Professional, they may be, but you need the passion. You need that, you know, leadership quality that inspires people. So yeah, it's frustrating for me because it's rare to find people like that. Very rare. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, literally. All right. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thanks for watching again. Next week will be part 2. Hopefully, I mean, if I feel well, of course. It depends on my health. But there is a part 2 to this, so stay tuned. And thanks for watching.